My husband told me he was taking the Singapore assignment, and I smiled and said, "I'm so proud of you." I meant every word. What he didn't know was that I had already met with a divorce attorney 3 weeks before he ever said it out loud. Let me start from the beginning, because this story isn't really about betrayal. It's about the moment I finally stopped pretending I didn't see what was right in front of me. My name is Priya. I'm 33 years old, and for 6 years I was the kind of wife who kept the house warm, remembered every anniversary, and convinced herself that a quiet marriage was a stable one. My husband, Arjun, was a financial analyst, sharp, disciplined, the kind of man who planned everything down to the last detail. I admired that about him once. Later, I understood he had also planned the things I was never supposed to find out about. We met in our mid-20s at a mutual friend's engagement party in San Diego. He was confident without being arrogant and laughed at my jokes even when they weren't very good. We dated for 2 years, got engaged on a cold Tuesday in November, and married the following spring. I was 27. I thought I had chosen wisely. For the first few years, we were genuinely happy. I worked as a high school counselor at a school across town. The job was demanding but meaningful, and I loved it. Arjun rose quickly at his firm, taking on bigger clients, traveling occasionally for meetings. We bought a small house with a yard, talked about kids in that vague, someday way young couples do, and built a life that looked exactly like what we'd both said we wanted. The cracks were small at first, a distance in his eyes during dinner, weekends where he was physically present but mentally somewhere else entirely. I told myself it was stress, that his firm had just landed a major client and he was under pressure. I told myself a lot of things in those years. The first moment I truly knew, not just suspected, was a Tuesday evening in March. I'd left work early, something I almost never did. Arjun was in his home office with the door cracked, and I heard him laugh. Not his work laugh, the careful, measured one. This was different, warm, unguarded, the kind of laugh I hadn't heard directed at me in a very long time. I stood in the hallway for a moment before walking past. He ended the call the second he saw me, said it was a client, said they'd just closed a big deal. I said that was great and went to start dinner, and I didn't bring it up again. But I started paying attention. I noticed he'd put a passcode on his phone for the first time in our marriage. I noticed he'd started going into the office on Sunday afternoons. I noticed that when his phone buzzed during dinner, he flipped it face down before I could see the screen. None of it was proof on its own. Together, it was a picture I didn't want to look at directly. 2 months later, his firm announced a major expansion into their Singapore office, an 18-month posting to lead the regional accounts team. Arjun came home that night looking like a man who'd already made his decision and was only now informing me of it. "They want to send me to Singapore," he said. "It's a huge step up. I'd be running the whole regional book." 18 months, I said. "It would set us up financially for years," he said. "The package is incredible." I asked if he'd thought about me coming with him. He paused half a second too long before explaining that the school had just offered me the head counselor position I'd been working toward for 3 years, and that it would be a waste to walk away from it now. It was practical. Every word of it made sense, and the way he delivered it, smooth, rehearsed, told me exactly how long he'd been preparing that speech. I told him I understood. I told him I was proud of him. I watched something in his shoulders relax, and I filed that away too. That night, after he fell asleep, I sat at the kitchen table with tea I never drank and let myself think clearly for the first time in months. I thought about the locked phone, the Sunday office visits, the way he turned his screen away. I thought about how the Singapore office had specifically requested him by name. I thought about who might have made that request. I'm a methodical person by nature, and years of working with teenagers in crisis teaches you to stay calm, gather information, and act only once you're certain. So I didn't cry that night. I made a list. Over the following 2 weeks, I did what needed doing. I called my older brother Vikram, an accountant with the kind of organized mind that untangles complicated situations for a living. I told him what I suspected. He asked one question. "Do you have access to everything?" I thought I did. He helped me confirm I didn't. What we found, once Vikram helped me look properly, was a pattern. Over the previous 13 months, Arjun had been moving small, irregular amounts out of our joint investment account into one I had no access to. No single transfer was large enough to trigger any alert. Together, they totaled just over $36,000. Not devastating on its own, but our joint account held just under $310,000. Money we'd built together over years, including $65,000 that had come directly from my father's estate after he passed 2 years earlier. That money had my name on it long before it ever touched ours. I sat with that for 3 days, then called a family law attorney named Renata. She was exactly who I needed in that moment, direct, unshockable, and completely unbothered by anything I told her. She walked me through my options with the calm of someone who'd heard every version of this story before. The inheritance is traceable, she said. We argue for its return as separate property. The joint funds depend on documentation. Do you have your pay stubs going back 6 years? I had every single one. I'd been saving them to a personal cloud folder since the wedding, not out of suspicion, just habit. My grandmother always said keep your paperwork. I'd never been more grateful for that advice. Renata told me timing and documentation would matter most. She advised opening a personal account Arjun had no access to before taking any further steps, and documenting everything I'd observed without confronting him directly. I left her office and opened a new account at a credit union across town, depositing $1,500 from money that had always been mine alone. I want to be honest about something. There were nights in those weeks I questioned everything, wondered if I'd built a story out of coincidence and fear. Arjun came home every evening. He asked about my day. He wasn't cruel. Part of me wanted to just ask him outright and have him tell me I was wrong. But I'd learned something about myself by then. I was done performing a certainty I didn't feel. If I was wrong, I could stop. If I was right, I wasn't going to be caught unprepared. 2 weeks before his scheduled departure, I got my answer. I ran into a woman named Ling at a coffee shop near his office, someone I'd met once at a company dinner. She was on the regional accounts team, the Singapore team. She smiled carefully, the smile of someone doing quick math in her head. "You must be excited about the move," she said. I said I was proud of him for the opportunity. She studied me for a second with an expression I recognized from years of reading teenagers who were deciding how much truth to tell. Then she said, "He's already been out there twice this year for site setup. I figured you knew." I thanked her and finished my coffee. Arjun had told me about one trip in February. He'd mentioned it the way you'd mention a dentist appointment. He'd never mentioned a second one. I checked the shared credit card that night and found a 4-night hotel charge in Singapore from April. That week, he'd told me he was in Phoenix for a conference. I called Renata the next morning. The 12 days before he left were the hardest of my life, and I doubt I'll ever fully explain them to anyone. I went to work, I came home. I cooked dinner and sat across from my husband and asked about his packing list and listened to him talk through logistics. And I said things like, "That's a lot to manage, but you'll handle it." Not one word of it was a lie. I was handling something too. He just didn't know it yet. 4 days before he left, with Renata's guidance, I transferred the full joint balance, $310,000, into my new account. I moved my direct deposit. I removed him from our shared checking account and moved those funds as well. Renata had walked me through exactly what I was and wasn't entitled to do. The inheritance was clearly mine to reclaim. The rest we'd negotiate through the divorce. This wasn't theft. It was protection. She filed the petition the next morning. Arjun knew none of it. The morning he left, I drove him to the airport. He had 2 suitcases and the distracted energy of a man already living somewhere else in his head. At the curb, he hugged me a beat longer than I expected. I held on too. I'm not made of stone. "I'll call you when I land," he said. "I know you will," I said. I watched him disappear through the doors, then sat in the car a few minutes before driving home. He called that night as promised. I asked about the flight. He said it was long, that Singapore was humid even at night. I told him to drink water. He laughed. We said goodnight. 3 days later, he called me screaming. I let him finish. Then I told him calmly that I'd retained an attorney and he'd be receiving paperwork. I told him I knew about the second trip in April. I told him I'd reviewed 13 months of transfers. I told him I hoped the role went well and that his attorney could reach Renata directly. He said other things after that. I don't need to repeat them. I've learned since that the specific words people say in those moments matter far less than what you actually do. The divorce took 7 months. Arjun's attorney fought hard on the investment transfer. Renata was better. My father's money came back to me in full, cleanly documented. The remaining assets were split, and I walked away with what I'd brought in, plus everything I'd earned. He kept his retirement account. I kept mine. I accepted the head counselor position 6 weeks after he left, the one he'd cited as a reason I shouldn't come with him, and I've been building something with it ever since. To anyone watching this who's standing where I once stood, the place where you know something's wrong but keep finding reasons not to look directly at it, I understand that place. I lived there for over a year. Here's what I wish someone had told me sooner. Looking clearly at the truth isn't the same as giving up. It isn't pessimism or distrust or failure. It's the most necessary thing you can do for yourself. I spent a long time afraid that if I looked closely at my marriage, I'd find something I couldn't survive. I was right, but surviving it, coming through it, was possible. It just required seeing it clearly first. There's something practical I want to say too, without judgment toward anyone. Know your finances. Know what accounts exist, what's in them, what you've put into them. Not because you should distrust your partner, but because that knowledge belongs to you. My brother helped me understand my own financial picture in a matter of days, and that changed everything. Keep your records. Know your numbers. Trust what you see. I'm not the woman who stood at that curb and held on a moment longer than she meant to. I'm also, somewhere, still her. I've made peace with both of those things. My life now is quieter than I expected and better than I feared. I work the hours I choose. I have dinner with my brother every Thursday. I sleep without that low-grade tension I'd carried so long I'd stopped noticing it. I'm building something that's entirely mine, and I'm finding I'm very good at it. Arjun is still in Singapore, as far as I know. The project continues. I hope, in the uncomplicated way you can hope for someone you once loved, that his work is going well. Mine certainly is.